In one of my all-time favorite stories from the Eastern Orthodox Church, a super pious monk was transferred to a new monastery. And as he was settling in, and as he was becoming more and more acquainted with his new context, he slowly began to realize that the vibe of this new community, it was way more laid back than his previous community. And this really concerned him, because he felt like he had made great strides towards perfection, holiness, saintliness, all of that good stuff at his last monastery. But now he feared that all of this could come unraveled, could come undone because of the laxity of this new brotherhood that he was a part of. And because of this, anger towards his new brothers began to bubble up within him. He felt as though his way of life as he has known it, was being threatened by their way of life. Why weren't they taking the spiritual life and prayer and all of this stuff as seriously as he was? Why weren't these brothers as pious and devout, as rigorous as the brothers he had known in his former context? Well, one day, while he was at the liturgy of the Eucharist, rather than praying, he decided to look up and look around to see what all of the other brothers were doing. More specifically, he wanted to see what all of the brothers were doing wrong during the liturgy. Sounds like he would be a great Episcopalian. At the very least, it seems like he would fit in many Episcopal contexts. Snarky side note, just to warn you, someday I'm hoping that I can make it to General Convention so that I can advocate for a new line in our baptismal covenant. Right after the lines, will you proclaim by word and example the good news of God in Christ? And will you seek and serve Christ in all persons, loving your neighbor as yourself? I would like to add the line, and will you forget all of this and be an absolute jerk to your brothers and sisters whenever they do not perform the liturgy in the exact way that you like it to be performed? I digress. End of tangent. Eventually, this pious monk's scrutinizing glare landed upon another monk. And this pious monk became absolutely livid at the very sight of this man. Why? Because rather than looking skinny and emaciated by fasting and a life of self-denial, this particular monk was kind of pudgy. How can someone be a monk if they've not even been successful in battling gluttony? The pious monk asked himself. What kind of circus is this, anyways? What are we doing here, right? And just as the community was entering into a series of bows during the service, this new monk's anger boiled over into rage, and he violently whispered under his breath, "My God, what a fat monk." At that very second, with that very breath, mid-bow, he threw his back out. And he was in so much pain that he had to waddle out of the sanctuary, still hunkered over, and he had to go lie down for a few days. He was in that much agony. All the while, the monk he had spent the entire service condemning secretly, he just kept on praying, completely oblivious to any of this pious monk's self-righteous indignation. Now, of course, the moral of this story, there's many morals to this story, but one of the huge ones, it's something that takes most of us a lifetime to figure out, if we ever figure it out at all. And the lesson is this, that if somebody makes me angry, my anger is my problem, not theirs. It's something that I must learn how to deal with. The person who has triggered my anger is not responsible for fixing my outrage, even if my anger against them is completely justified. At no point, by the way, was this monk's anger ever justified, just to clear that up in case you were wondering. Now, we all know this to be true. Deep down, oftentimes we don't want to admit it, that we are the ones who are responsible for our anger issues. For even if the person who wronged me comes to me and apologizes to me, it does not automatically mean that I will stop fuming over whatever they did to me. But furthermore, the opposite of that could also be true. Even if they never utter the words, "I am sorry," I can still let go of all of my resentment and forgive them nonetheless. At the end of the day, it's not about what they do or they don't do. It's all about what I choose to do with my emotions in the moment. So anger is an internal issue, not an external issue. It's an issue of the heart, not of the world around us. But the problem is most of us go through life acting as if our anger were a problem exterior to us, outside of us. Like the self-righteous monk, we convince ourselves that the world around us is to be blamed for the lack of peace that we feel within our own hearts. If only the people around me would live like me, work like me, pray like me, eat like me, talk like me, vote like me, think like me, look like me, well, then life would just be peachy. And then I would be really happy. The problem is life does not work that way. But nonetheless, we become angry because we let ourselves believe that the world is the greatest culprit for our lack of happiness. So what do? We attempt to control our world, thinking that if we could simply micromanage as much as possible that goes on around us, this will grant us the serenity and the joy that we feel that we are lacking in life. But as the great wisdom saying goes, the person who would regulate everything according to their own ideas is an insufferable ass. We become insufferable asses whenever we attempt to fix our problems ourselves by trying to fix the perspectives and the habits of the people around us. And when the day finally arrives, when we realize that the world around us, it's not going to live by the script that we have written for it, well, we become all the more enraged, irritated, and bitter. We start to feel like the world is out to get us, to sabotage us. Little do we realize that we are the ones who are sabotaging ourselves. My friends, as long as we blame the people in the world around us for our lack of contentment, anger will always be a pervasive presence in our lives, perhaps the most pervasive thing in our lives. But to be very clear, this does not mean that we should never let ourselves feel anger. We will never heal it by repressing it, stuffing it away. In St. Paul's letter to the Ephesians, he never says, "Come on now, y'all, don't get angry. Let's just be happy clappy for Jesus all the time, 24/7. He doesn't say that. No, he says, be angry, but do not sin. Be angry, but don't let the sun go down on your anger. Don't carry it with you into the next day. Feel your anger and all of the intensity of it, but then let it go immediately. As St. Thomas Aquinas has said, be angry, this is brilliant, by the way, be angry at the right people for the right reasons, and express your anger in an appropriate manner and for an appropriate length of time. So it's okay to feel the full force of your anger. In fact, it is necessary for you to do so. There are some people that you must be angry with sometimes. And there are some causes that should incite your fury. But choose to put an expiration date on all of your rage. Treat your anger like you would treat the garbage. The longer you wait to take it out to the curb, the worse your house is going to stink. So get rid of it quickly, right? Now, most of us would say, great plan, Captain Obvious, thank you. But how do we actually do that? It's easy to feel anger. We can let ourselves do that. But when it comes to letting it go, that is much easier said than done. How do we do what St. Paul tells us to do? To put away all bitterness and wrath and anger and wrongdoing and slander and malice. How do we do that? Well, Paul, he gives us two methods here. For one, he tells us, this is obviously simple, but we tend to not follow that which is so obviously simple. For one, he tells us that we need to get to the point where we stop talking about our anger all of the time, where we stop especially slandering and gossiping about wrongdoers. For whenever we stop talking about it, we stop dwelling on it so much. It's as simple as that. And that in of itself is like half the battle. If we could just close our mouths, we would be far less angry. And the person who is constantly complaining about how they have been mistreated, they'll never find any healing. Because talking it out is not going to actually bring any healing. Again, put an expiration date on all of your complaining. Find somebody trustworthy to vent to them one time, get it off of your chest and out of your system, and then make the decision to drop it, to let it go, to bury it. Better yet, go and talk to the person that you're actually angry with. Do what you can to speak the truth to them in love, as Paul says. I mean, who knows? If you can see things from their perspective, perhaps you'll realize that you really had no reason to get angry to begin with, right? You never know. And if at any point you find that you want to act less than charitable to them as you're talking to them, just remember that there are plenty of people you have wronged throughout the course of your lifetime as well. Just remembering that by itself is enough to shift things back into perspective for us. Now, the second thing that Paul tells us to do is channel our anger. Paul doesn't want us to stop talking about our anger in order to repress it, to ignore it, to stuff it away. No, he wants us to stop droning on and on about it so that we can rechannel all of that emotional energy into something useful and helpful. And Paul says we can do this by imitating God. Since God has forgiven us, who are we to withhold forgiveness from others, to hold on to our anger towards them? And the best way to love those who have hurt us, who have upset us, is to pray for them. Daily, often. So rechannel all of that energy around your anger into prayer. Pray that God would bless the one who hurt you. Pray that they would experience the full scope of God's love and grace. Pray that they would be truly happy, that their hearts would be full of joy. Pray for them in the way that you would love to have others pray for you. And even go so far as to thank God for them. For if you are wise, you will understand that those people who have hurt you, who have angered you, those people who have treated you like an enemy, it is they who have helped you in life more than any other, especially in your spiritual journey. As one saint has prayed, just as a hunted animal finds safer shelter than an animal that's not being hunted, so have I, persecuted by my enemies, found the safest sanctuary. I have found the safest sanctuary, having hidden myself beneath your tabernacle, O Lord. Friends and family members and loved ones can comfort us, can put our hearts at rest in their presence. But an enemy will always drive us into the arms of God. Because of this, an enemy is one of the most useful people in one's spiritual journey, if the one doing the journeying knows how to respond to their presence lovingly and wisely. Besides, if for nothing else, we should learn how to pray for and to love our enemies for our own good, for our own well-being. For it's impossible to love God and to harbor anger against somebody else at the same time. It's just impossible. As St. John says, the person who claims to love God but who hates another person, they're a liar. And have you ever noticed that in the Lord's Prayer, Jesus has taught us to pray in such a way where we are forced to acknowledge that God's forgiveness of us is conditional on the forgiveness that we extend to other people. Forgive us our trespasses just as we forgive those who trespass against us. In other words, Father, forgive us with the same amount of forgiveness that we extend to other people. Father, show us just as much grace as we show to others. My friends, to hold on to anger is to reject God. Whenever I dwell in my anger, I impair the Holy Spirit's capacity to dwell within me. As one modern activist has said, I really only love God as much as the person I love the least. I really only love God as much as the person I love the least. So the question is, how much do you love God, really?